It's time to play some Rogue in Dragonflight with the new talents that have been changed since last time we checked, which was probably about 2 months ago. It's been a while since we looked at Assassination Rogue, because that's what's on the menu for today. And we're gonna talk a little bit about the changes and what it could look like, maybe the final version of Assassination, bar some numbers, tuning and crunching to make sure that you can, do some damage properly. And if you like this type of stuff and you want to see us play live all of these specs and more, check our stream on twitch.tv/Marcelian&Flame. We stream 4 to 5 days a week and we play dungeons and raids with you guys, and more recently you get to pick what spec I play on the stream, and that's fun for you. Shadow Priest. But listen, we do have a stream and we do like to chat and talk about WoW, play some WoW with you guys, have a good time, get a vibe going. And if you enjoy that kind of stuff, consider checking our twitch.tv/Marcelian&Flame. You can leave a follow if you'd like to. And you can stick around and we can, chat some WoW, which is always good. Now let's actually go talk about Assassination, because it's about time. It's about damn time. Now, the general talent tree has been addressed somewhat. Many of the quality of life talents have been moved closer to the top of the talent tree, so they're a little bit more accessible, and you don't, have as much utility nodes to pick on when you go further down below, where there's a little bit more throughput. We're basically talking about Blackjack, that has replaced improved sap and is now under feint and Cloak of Shadows, but it's, a niche talent, so you can skip some of these, no problems, depending exactly on what you want to do and what you need. Under improved sprint, you now have the choice node of elusiveness versus cheat death. They're very spread around in the middle and the sub part of the tree, which is kind of what's more towards the right hand side. On the left side of this choice node, you now have the deadened nerves, with more paths coming out of it, going down to more options that you can pick for, instead of the old virulent poisons, which was a dead-end talent, and now it's more on the assassin-y side of the talent tree. And on the right side, you have rushed setup, moved here with the new paths as well, new paths going towards all the cool options. And like we said in the past, this can be considered a damage increase node if you need to CC a lot. Talking about the edges of the talent tree, improved wound poison and subterfuge are no longer dead-end talents, so you can take them and continue pathing down towards each respective side of the talent tree. Tight Spender is right under Shadow Step now and is a 1-pointer, so yay, because it was a 2-pointer before, and you can skip it if you want it, which is always good to have options. Improved Ambush was moved into the subtlety part of the tree and is now a 1-pointer, so once again, yay, because, less cost in taking this, because let's be honest, it's kind of cool. I kind of like playing with Ambush. And Shooting Darkness has made its appearance under Improved Ambush from the sub-tree, and this can help you a lot in solo content if you decide to go down this path. What this does is you are healed for 30% of your maximum health over 6 seconds after gaining Vanish or Shadow Dance. Pretty cool survivability talent and decent enough sustain. Shadow Dance got a somewhat big nerf. It now lasts 6 seconds and has lost its damage amplification from before, making it less of a must take, and it makes the other options a little bit more viable now. It's always good to have a little bit more competition. Whether or not this becomes a problem later on, especially for subtlety, we'll see, but yeah, it's okay-ish so far. And kind of like the last major change on the right-hand side of the talent tree, the choice node of Deeper Stratagem versus Mark for Death is right under Alacrity, which it might be good for the overall design of the rogue. Personally, I'm not a big fan. I've always thought Alacrity is a pretty boring talent, and it's whether or not it's boring, it's kind of a good talent to pick, and as rogues, we've picked this for at least 2 expansions that I am aware of. And now you have to take it if you want to take either Deeper Stratagem or Mark for Death, which, sure, fine. It is on the row, if we can call it a row, of throughput and stat buffing talents. So yeah, it is what it is. On the left-hand side, we have Vigor swapping places with Cold Blood. And Thistletea was buffed, and now on top of the 100 energy, it gives also a mastery buff as well, which is kind of good in the sense that hardly ever you would have wanted to pick Thistletea outside of like maybe 1 or 2 niche and cute builds, based on its own functionality and the investment cost of going all the way down to it, considering that the other capstones were a little bit more competitive. but also with the nerf of shadowlands, who knows, maybe now it's even appealing. As for the middle side of the talent tree, Resounding Clarity is now a 1-pointer and at a choice node with reverberations. Resounding Clarity, essentially what it does is the Echoing Reprimand anima charges 3 additional combo points, while the Reverberation one makes Echoing Reprimand damage deal 75% more. So basically you get to choose the upgrade for Echoing Reprimand if that is the capstone that you will be going for. And the last thing in the general tab that is worth mentioning is Lethality and Alacrity are now 2-pointers down from 3, which once again, that's pretty cool. We love to see point reduction for specific talents because having to sink a lot of points into them when there's so many cool stuff that we can get is just doesn't really feel that great. In the actual spec talent tree, not as many changes actually, but the changes that have been made are pretty noticeable and open up for some more builds. Firstly, Fatal Concoction has replaced the old Atrophic Poison, which, if I recall, it wasn't actually implemented to be tested. And now what this does is makes your weapon poisons deal 15% increased damage, which is, core for Assassination Fantasy. That's pretty cool. I like when my daggers deal poison damage. And a lot more connections have opened up to make up more builds possible. And from Fatal Concoction, you can go down to the new DPS cooldown Death Mark, a now 2-minute cooldown that makes you carve a Death Mark into an enemy, dealing quite a little bit of damage in terms of bleed for 16 seconds. While the target is marked, your Garrote, Rupture, and Lethal Poisons applied to the target are duplicated, dealing 100% of normal damage, which is pretty cool, pretty Assassination-y, kind of replaces the old Vendetta, which is nice. And a lot more connections have been opening up from Deathmark into pretty much all sides of the talent tree, which this is actually maybe the only talent tree that has 4 connections going down from one particular talent, showing how central Deathmark is for the Assassination talent tree, which is really interesting, really cool, and really bold considering that some classes have at most 2 or maybe 3 paths if the devs were generous in designing the talent tree. But now you can definitely take Deathmark and pretty much go everywhere you want in the talent tree. And not only from Deathmark, there are a lot more pathways from stuff like improved poisons, increasing the application chance of your poison by 5 and then 10%, to lightweight Shiv. Shiv has 1 additional charge, and improved Garrote. On the right hand side, Garrote deals 50% increased damage and has no cooldown when used from stealth and for 3 seconds after breaking stealth. You also now have a path from Throne Precision on the left hand side, which makes Fan of Knives damage increase by 15% and has a 5% increased critical strike chance, down to Crimson Tempest, which we know has been a finisher that we've been using for quite a while now, and it goes down to Systemic Failure, which makes Garrote increase the damage of Ambush and Mutilate on the target by 20%, and of course, Tiny Toxic Blade. Shiv deals 500% increased damage and no longer costs energy, which is kind of like the old Toxic Blade from BFA that's kind of wish we had back. But hey, it is what it is. Going down to Zoldyck Recipe, your poisons and bleeds deal 10% increased damage to targets below 30% health, basically the execute part. And obviously this is a 3-pointer, still a heavy investment, but you do end up dealing 30% increased damage in execute phase, which is pretty cool. Same thing happened on the right hand side from Intent to Kill, which is the very, very right hand side talent, making Shadow Step cooldown be reduced by 33% when used on a target affected by a Garrote, making Garrote a more central ability for your entire playstyle, which goes down to Exsanguinate, which maybe one day this will be good. If you have never played Assassination and you were wondering about this ability, this is one of the cooler abilities that Assassination has that just in practice does not put the numbers out, although this might have changed with the recent tuning. Basically what this is a 45-second cooldown. Twist your blades into the target wounds, causing your bleed effect on them to bleed out 100% faster. So, but this has like a lot of mechanics under the hood that will prop it up to potentially either be really good or really bad the way that it is now. Then it of course goes down to Iron Wire. Garrote silences the target for 6 seconds when used from stealth. Enemies silenced by Garrote deal 15 reduced damage for 8 seconds. Kind of more of a PvP thing, although the utility of a silence on Garrote can be particularly cool, especially if you take improved Garrote and you can do essentially like 3 Garrotes from stealth. You can but 3 target silence for 6 seconds, which is major good. Whether or not you would need this obviously is very situational. And from Iron Wire, you'll path down to Doomblade. Mutilate deals an additional 20% bleed damage over 8 seconds, which honestly, man, this as a fantasy is so cool. I wish this part of the talent tree will become viable because I really want to play with it in high content, maybe even raids, because bleeds, man. Damn! And from Doomblade, you have 2 paths. First of all, it goes down to Shrouded Suffocation, increasing growth damage by 15%, and growth generates 2 additional combo points when cast from stealth. Once again, the synergy with improved growth from way higher up is amazing as a combo point generator. And also from Doomblade, you go down to Sepsis versus Serrated Bone Spike. Now, we've covered Assassination a bunch of times in the past. I'm not sure if we ever caught the Serrated Bone Spike iteration on it, but it is here. So basically, these are the Covenant abilities. You know, Sepsis from Night Fae, 1.5 minute cooldown, infect the target's blood, dealing quite a bit of nature damage over 10 seconds. If the target survives its full duration, they suffer an additional damage, which is quite a bit, and you gain 1 use of any stealth ability for 5 seconds, which could probably still be growth. And the cooldown is reduced by 30 seconds if Sepsis does not last its full duration, aka the target dies. Serrated Bone Spikes is the Necrolord counterpart. It's a 30-second recharge, 3-charge ability, where you embed a bonus spike in the target, dealing quite a bit of physical damage and a smallish bleed every 3 seconds until they die or leave combat. So this is like a permanent debuff, and you have 3 charges of it, and it generates an additional combo point plus 1 additional combo point per active bone spike. So this is probably more oriented towards AoE, although Sepsis can probably have some AoE applications as well, where you want to spread them out and generate some pretty cool combo points with it if this becomes a talent that you would end up picking. And lastly, from Deathmark, to the left and to the right, you have Vicious Venoms and Lethal Dose. Vicious Venoms makes Ambush and Mutilate deal an additional 10% damage as nature, and obviously a 2-pointer bumps this up to 20%, which is always good to deal, let's say, magical damage, because that is now reduced by armor, so it ends up dealing more damage overall. While Lethal Dose, your weapon poisons, nature damage over time, and bleed abilities deal 1% increased damage to targets for each weapon, poison, nature damage over time, and bleed effect on them. And obviously this goes up to 2-pointers. We talked about this, I think, in the Assassination podcast, mentioning how interesting and potentially really good this is. And I think this has been nerfed because it's a total of 2% right now, and if I recall, it was slightly higher at early stages of the alpha. But either way, this obviously promotes you debuffing the enemy with a lot of like bleeds and poisons and all that good stuff, and promoting that playstyle, because it has to feel good when your target has like all the bleeds and all the poisons and you're hitting that target and it deals damage. And yes, that is what Assassination is all about. Another part of the good changes that happened to the Assassination is we go a little bit higher up back into the talent sheet to Cut to the Chase and Internal Bleeding, which they've become 1-pointers. Cut to the Chase makes Envenom extend the duration of Slice and Dice by up to 3 seconds per combo point spent, which is kind of like a quality of life, because it kind of sucks to like refresh Slice and Dice. It's the low impact ability in terms of like the global spent, but obviously it translates into a lot of damage overall. While Internal Bleeding makes Kidney Shot also deal a specific amount of damage in bleed over 6 seconds. It kind of scales right now to 5 times 18% of your attack power. The math is not really important. What's important is that if you do have to, you know, stun a target with Kidney Shot and waste those combo points, you are still rewarded with an extra bleed, which obviously synergizes with what we talked about before, stuff like Lethal Dose. Hopefully it is included into that, because it is another source of bleed. So you might be, it probably won't be a DPS gain to use that on Kidney Shot instead of an actual finisher, but if you do have to use it, you don't lose as much damage, which is kind of cool. I kind of like that mindset. However, although I mentioned this earlier, Zoldic's Recipe and Dashing Scoundrel, together with Scent of Blood, which are the 3 talent nodes prior to getting into the capstones, have been bumped to be 3-pointers instead of 2-pointers. Probably to offset the amount of talent points that you would need to spend into the talent, because there has to be an overall point economy, right? You cannot just reduce all of them, because it would just be completely imbalanced towards others unless you just add new nodes, which kind of bumps. So if the total points that you can ever spend, if you would be able to get all of them, is about 50, which is slightly more than what other specs have. Some of them revolve around a little bit over 40, 45, 47. but with the amount of point cost reductions that you've had, they would have to increase this mostly and likely because I think they did say this in a blue post on the specific spec, not necessarily to Rogue, but they want to make sure that the capstones and the builds are essentially balanced, so they're not very accessible where you can just like fill in with all the capstones, particularly for Assassination, which is a spec that has very high impact capstones with, you know, stuff like Indiscriminate, Carnage, and King's Bane and Dragon Temper Blades, which do like a lot of very particular things, and if you mash them all together, you might explode in terms of like, you know, how the spec is supposed to function. So it's probably down for balance reasons, which it doesn't really still feel good to put 3 points in, but hey, if these are the only ones that are 3-pointers, then you're likely gonna get 1, maybe 2 of them, although that remains to be seen on what the ideal builds will be. Deathmark was also buffed last time, if you've seen this, where it's now the buff lasts for 20 seconds instead of 15, reflecting what the duplicate thing means now in the tooltip, which is also pretty good. Tiny Toxic Blade was buffed to 500% extra damage, like I mentioned before, as opposed to the 300% that was before, which love to see, because, you know, that's always been like a cool ability for Assassination to use. And King's Bane was also buffed a little to the lethal poison damage and increases from 15% to 20%, while Indiscriminate Carnage was also buffed to have a 1-minute cooldown down from a 1.5-minute cooldown. Love to see that stuff. And of course, we cannot end the video without talking about the tier set. The 2-piece, what it does is increases the damage of your weapon poison by 10%, so more reasons to go the Dragon Temper Blades instead of the other 2, I guess, maybe. It sounds like that would probably be what you would want to do, which is a little bit counterintuitive to what they've said that they want the tier set to be. They didn't want them for you to feel like you have to get specific talents to take advantage of the tier set, so we'll see exactly how this feels once the Season 1 launches. And the 4-piece is a little bit more interesting. It gives your weapon poisons a 50% chance to gain specific wounds, increasing all bleeding damage done by 2% for 8 seconds, and it stacks up to 5 times. Because of that, you know, the Dragon Temper Blades could also impact this a little bit more. So it's I guess it remains to be seen, because there's a lot of number crunching that we need to do. And we're still, you know, looking at all of the information that we have available from the Ravenhold Discord. The boys are still testing things out, and likely tuning is still happening from a week-to-week basis. So I just mentioned like a whole bunch of buffs that Assassination has received. So it's likely that we're probably going to be seeing buffs, maybe not to this magnitude, in the upcoming weeks as we get closer and closer to Dragonflight's release. Tell me Assassination doesn't look really cool, man. Tell me Assassination doesn't look like something that you should freaking main, man. Bring back the poisons and the bleeds and making your target explode with all of this damage over time as a melee feels amazing, and I love to see all these synergies. I love to see it coming all together in a much more tuned out, designed, and buffed and nerfed version. Rather, it's mostly buffed. I don't think there's been any nerf, maybe, so far, outside of just, you know, point swapping here and there, but it's looking pretty good. And what do you think about Assassination? Let us know in the comment section down below. We kind of want to see what people are actually thinking when they look at this version of Assassination, which personally I think it looks amazing. It's one of the best talent trees out there, where you clearly have, you know, single target AoE, you have poisons and bleeds, you have all sorts of cool cooldowns and new abilities being added into the tree, which is not a lot, not something that you can say for a lot of other specs. Like Deathmark and Indiscriminate Carnage is really cool. So that's it for the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, patrons, for supporting the channel. Once again, you can check our twitch.tv/Marcelian online if you want to see us play live and have a chat and talk WoW and maybe even do some dungeons and raids. Take care, everybody. Peace.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.